Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Zach Posner. I'm a co-founder and a managing partner at the LegalTech Fund. I'm thrilled, honored, humbled, all the above to have our portfolio company SimplyAgree here with us today, and specifically Will. And Will may or may not recall, but I went back and our fund really didn't get off the ground until 2020, but we started conversations on March 19th, 2019. So I've known you for quite a bit now. Quite a bit
Before
now.
you were officially in legal tech. Yeah.
Yeah. And we probably should have jumped all in back then, and it probably would have saved us a lot of money or given us a much bigger opportunity. But that being said, I'm thrilled that you joined us today. I'm thrilled we got to see you last week at ILTA. If okay with you, can I jump in for a few questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So we've kind of started all of these with the same types of questions, but if you were not, actually, I'll start with this one. If give us one basic fun fact about you that people would not know.
Yeah. So one thing that people may know about me is that I'm really into music. I sang in college and play a few instruments. People may be aware of that, but what they may not know is that the first instrument I learned how to play was the violin, and I started playing it when I was 2 years old, which I think should mean that I should be a virtuoso by now, according to the 10,000 hours theory, but far from it. But occasionally I get to pull it out and play some tunes. So yeah.
And you have young kids. Have you like started them on instruments or?
We've not yet, other than banging things, a lot of banging around the house, but no instruments yet.
Awesome. If you were not doing something in legal tech, what would you be doing right now?
I think I would still be in technology. I was in a small program at my college for computer science and management, specifically to kind of help folks kind of go into, at the time, it was more like large company, like helping with tech and innovation. And a lot of companies went out to do startups. So I was actually roommates with a group of guys who went on to create a sports technology startup that's been super successful. I think if I hadn't gone to law school, I probably would have ended up working with them at some point. And actually, when I made the decision to go to law school that summer before, I interned at Deere & Company, the company that makes John Deere equipment, and was in their data planning and design division, which would have been a fascinating place to be for the last couple of decades because they've been in all of the big data stuff and they're doing a bunch of interesting things. So I think I'd been in technology in some form or another, either with some kind of a startup or working in tech. But yeah, super excited that we've ended up in legal. It's someplace that I think could use it, and it's a great place to be.
No, we obviously couldn't agree more, but I'm just curious, the sports, what was the technology doing that your colleagues did or your buddies?
So I went to school at the University of Nebraska, which people who've been in Nebraska know it's a big football state. So they, one of the co-founders worked in the athletic department, and he built basically technology for them to do online playbooks. And at the time, this was just after like the iPad came out, and it was like you could do your whole playbook and like watch film and like give annotations and corrections on an iPad. It grew to the point where they were in a bunch of colleges, they were in the NFL, and then they eventually took it down to where it was supporting like high school players being able to cut up film. And this became the tools now Huddle, which most now like high school players, when they are looking to go to college, they'll like create these highlight videos. But the company's just like everywhere in sports, like they're in the Premier League, they're in a whole bunch of different places, but still based in Lincoln, Nebraska. They built a pretty awesome company there.
That is pretty awesome. All right, let's jump over to SimplyAgree. Give us a quick backstory. Like, what was the founding story here?
Yeah, so we got started in 2016. My co-founder and I both practiced law in Nashville, Tennessee. I worked for Baker Donaldson, and Sam, my co-founder, worked at Bassberry & Sims in Nashville. I worked in the emerging companies venture capital practice. And one of the big challenges in that practice is you're trying to figure out ways you can go and support startups from very early on, something that I know you know well, Zach. And so from a legal perspective, trying to get in at the like point of organization or when they're first getting financing and be able to work for them like really efficiently was important. So we had to figure out ways to adopt technology to do that effectively, but there wasn't a whole lot of great technology to be able to do that. So I actually built the first version of SimplyAgree to support that practice when we were going through like representing a bunch of companies going through accelerators, helping them to like form and get financing and that sort of thing. And I started taking it to other people, including my co-founder, Sam, and saying, you know, do you think this could be used in other practices? He did more sort of like M&A and private equity. But what we saw was it was a lot of the same common sort of pain points and problems, particularly around the closing process that we said, I think there's something here where this might be like a really important problem that we could, you know, really do a lot with technology to help solve. But one of the big problems was there's a lot of kind of general purpose tools. There's DocuSign, there's document animation tools, but not necessarily that's built for fitting into the workflows that users have already and that we think there's good reason for there to be. So we really built SimplyAgree to say, don't change your process. We're not trying to revolutionize everything you're doing, but how can you fit a tool into your existing process? At the time, I think what's really interesting is I think we, from our sort of like anecdotal discussions, probably 90% of M&A attorneys were not using electronic signatures back in 2016, 2017. And so our initial hypothesis was this could be a tool if we can fit into their existing workflows, they could start adopting e-signatures onto their deals. Of course, COVID happened, so we were like really well positioned to do that. And now it's much of the same. Like, how can we take technology that's pretty widely available in other industries and fit it into a process that legal tech can take advantage of it? And I think that really helps us with our users, that we don't ask them to change a lot about what they're currently doing to use our tool.
Yeah, and one of the things that, you know, originally we were introduced by an associate at a law firm, and I remember having lunch with him or coffee with him, and he said he won't go to a law firm that does not have your software. So I'm curious, like, hey, you know, I guess the next question would be, when did you realize you had something? Like, when was it? When did you say this is not just a tool we're building for my own firm? This is something that we really need to take out there to the world.
Yeah, I think that's where for us, retention is a really important metric. If you see a user that not only uses it for a deal, but comes to it deal after deal after deal, and we saw that kind of from law firm to law firm, it only took a handful of users, and then they were just like, that became integral to their process. And interesting, one of our like biggest areas for growth has been deal teams and attorneys that move firms and basically demand that they have SimplyAgree as part of joining the new firm, or say, if you don't have something, like you need to be using something like SimplyAgree. And so, you know, when did we know we had something? I would say it's probably around that sort of 2020 sort of inflection point where a lot of firms were saying we need to move to the cloud, we need to start adopting e-signatures. How can we support our attorneys that just are like having bandwidth issues with supporting the deal volume that's coming through? And I would say in that like 2020 to 2021 period, it was really clear, like, this is really solving a core problem for our users. And, you know, there was always refinements. We've listened to our customers in terms of the way we improve and iterate on the product. So there's always things for us to improve on, but we were like hitting the core workflows of what they really cared about with helping them generate signature packets, build their closing binders, and then a whole bunch of iterations on like how they approach that based on their practice group and the type of clients they have. But I would say sometime in that period, we knew we were onto something.
I'm curious if there's like a metric that you think about, like maybe as a former attorney, like, you know, wow, on any given transaction, we save X amount of hours on any, like, is there something that like drives you, or, you know, I know the path of entrepreneurship has like ups and downs, but like, are there some numbers in the back of your mind that say, wow, that, you know, not only are you onto something, but like, this is important for this, you know, for these practice areas, these associate, these folks. Like, I'm just curious how you think about that.
I think the number for us that was most, that sort of like turn the light bulb of like, this is exactly the right problem to be solving, was when we started having conversations with firms about the amount of hours that are being written off on their closing process. So we talked to a number of AmLaw 100 and AmLaw 50 firms that said, we think we're writing off maybe 40 to 50% of our time around these closings, especially any post-closing work. Like, our lawyers are getting paid out of the final bill and they're trying to estimate, but they're never very good at estimating. And so we end up just doing a bunch of work we don't get paid for. And so that's what told us, hey, this is a process where, you know, the law firms and the clients and the, you know, us as a vendor all feel, you know, equally aligned and incentivized to make this a more efficient process. And so typically, just to give you a sense, the closing process from the time you're creating signature packets all the way through, you know, compiling your final executed agreements and closing binder, it's like 10 to 30 hours generally for the types of transactional complex closings we work on. Even if we can just capture, you know, 1, 2, 3 hours at the end of those deals, you know, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that the law firm is saving. much less, the client is probably saving like multiple thousands of dollars by doing these deals more efficiently. So, that to me was like, clearly that has real benefit, not just for the users, but for the law firm, where there's real ROI and profitability impact for us.
Give me a sense of like size and scale. Like how many transactions do you guys do a month or a week or a day? Or I don't know how you think about it, but I'm just curious, like the volume of this these days.
Yeah, so we're now in over 100 large law firms, most of which are AmLaw 200 law firms, because they're doing the vast majority of these complex closings that we're focused on. So think mergers and acquisitions, commercial real estate, commercial finance, venture capital, capital markets, private equity, and like our atomic unit as a business is the number of transactions we do. So maybe back to your point of like, what's the one number that I have in my mind that I want to see every day or every month? The number of transactions in our system, the average number of transactions per firm, the growth and the rate of change with that per firm is a huge metric for me. And almost every firm we work with grows over time. So we have firms that start by doing maybe a few dozen transactions as they're getting started in the tool and rolling it out. And then they grow to where they're doing hundreds. And we have some firms doing over, thousands of transactions a year in SimplyAgree. I think on a monthly basis, we're like coming up on like 2,500. So we should be by the end of this year doing 25,000 transactions per year. And that's really focused on those complex closings. So we do have firms using us sometimes for small like engagement letters and other things like that. We don't even count those in that number, but the number of complex closings is, I think, exceeding 25,000 this year.
Wow. That is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Where,
it's incredible.
obviously you and the team are doing some pretty awesome work. Where, as the pieces continuously fall in line perfectly, which is I'm sure how it happens. What does this look like in 5 years, 10 years? Like, how do you think of a bigger vision, or how do you think about, where this could go? Because I know that you have tons of customers, and I know that they love you. And I know that, you kind of come at this from a product background.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you're always thinking about their needs. Like, how do you see this playing out over time?
Yeah, interestingly, most of our competitors approach this problem saying kind of all of the above kitchen sink approach to let's just try to solve all of transactional attorneys' problems with their tools. So most of the time, those tools are built off a closing checklist or conditions precedent. Basically, like how do we kind of support deal teams from diligence through the closing? I think maybe the best decision we've made is to focus specifically on the closing process, on that really focused problem. But our eyes have never kind of gotten off of like that full process could be, transformed or supported differently. So the closing we really see as the start of where we can go and then grow over time. But kind of the way you can think about our approach to software, particularly for legal technology, that I think is really important for this industry, is starting with a really small problem. Showing that we can provide value in building that trust with users, such that when we grow into new areas, they feel really comfortable with like SimplyAgree supported me and my process here. So I think they could also help me in these other places. But I think you can think up and down the transaction, a whole bunch of different places where we could support our existing stakeholders in law firms, maybe folks outside of law firms, because today we're very focused on law firms, but there's a whole bunch of other parties on these deals as well that could be supported by technology. But we really think about, we are very much deal tech that is supporting the transaction in some way or another. And as we start to, grow to a point where most of the major law firms and most of the large complex transactions are already going through this tool, through our current closing tool, we'll certainly be looking at additional products that we can be building out to support them. 5 to 10 years is a really long time for a startup. So, ask me again in a few years, but we'll definitely be looking to grow.
Lessons learned over the past couple of years.
So many. So we've, one of the things I would really recommend to startups, and I don't know if you'll be mad at me for saying this or you'll be happy at me for saying this, but I would really suggest to startups that oftentimes you're sort of inundated with legal tech media about like how much people have raised and their fundraising strategies, and not so much about their like customer development and like how they're building their product. We started off very kind of like bootstrapped and scrappy and raised some like angel funding. And that was probably, by the time we talked, I think we had been in the market for 5 or 6 years. And it felt like it was only until that point that we were really ready to raise institutional funding and be able to take advantage of it and scale. So maybe my like number one recommendation for legal tech startups in particular is there are long sales cycles. That's very true. Oftentimes you're having to educate the market or kind of find your niche, or going up against really big players where it just takes time to find your footing. And so having that patience, doing things, as close to ramen profitable as you can, as cheaply as you can to start until you get that traction, you start to see where you have the product market fit and where you can grow. I think that's super important. But even having done that, I think when we started raising kind of our first institutional capital a couple of years ago, I think we made some mistakes in trying to scale in maybe some ways that we didn't really need to scale, and getting away from some of the things that had made us successful in the first place. And so really keeping in mind, like, customer first, this market cares a lot about the way that you communicate with them, the way that you are thinking about their problems and looking to support them. So like, do it the bootstrapped way, support your customers really well. And then like things like funding and growth will sort of follow that as you're having success. But don't start with, hey, we raised $10 million and now you got to go figure out what to do with it.
No, and I felt that deeply about you guys, like from the first time I met you, and I think we were trying our part to send you over when we talk to innovative customers that are like, we're looking for these types of things. We're like, hey, you got to talk to Will and the team over here, because we believed you would never let them down. Like no matter what, that was like central to your entire DNA. And I agree with you. I think that there's, I like that construct of like, find your footing, raise as little as possible until you figure out what it is you're doing and how you, at least can have visibility to a line of like rinse and repeat and understand some of these things. Awesome. And how was we just got back from Ilta. How was that in your hometown?
Yeah, it was really cool that we it was back first time we had an IltaCon in Nashville, which is where we are based. We still have an office in Nashville. We actually held a kind of a welcome party in our first customer advisory board event, just a few blocks from where we started the company, from my former condo where SimplyAgree was started. So it was just really neat to like not only be in Nashville, but to like spend a little time in East Nashville, where a lot of our folks are based and where we got started. It's really cool. IltaCon feels like it's one of the few conferences other than the LegalTech Fund Summit where they're just like everyone we want to meet is there, and getting to like interact with both like existing customers and prospective customers that we've had conversations with potential partners and other companies that we can integrate with, and just hearing about all the cool stuff that's going on. It feels like you can kind of get all of the above, all that's happening there. But really for us, like IltaCon is for our customers, which is why it was really cool to kick off our first customer advisory board event and do that kind of in a place that was close for us in East Nashville. So we had a great experience there. And IltaCon, there's always this high from IltaCon where like you have so many conversations, everything is going so great. And now there's like a little bit of a lull of like, all right, now what do we do with all that? Let's go like figure out how to like.
Now you got to send 200 follow-up emails and try to remember every single.
It's been my last 2 days and the rest of the week for sure.
If folks here want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
So our company's website is simplyAgree.com. We have LinkedIn, we have, the normal social media, and my email. Please feel free to reach out directly to me. I'm will@simplyAgree.com. And we'd love to hear from you or ways that we can support you.
Will, it is awesome that we get to work with you day in and day out, but it's also awesome that you joined us here to share a little bit about what you're doing. I thank you.
Yeah, Zach, really appreciate getting a chance to work with you and the opportunity to speak today. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
And thanks to everybody for joining.